Goedenavond. Mevrouw de president. In de Amerikaanse verkiezingen was er eind jaren 80 voor het eerst een kandidaat die serieus kans dacht te maken op die titel. En vanavond volgen we haar leerzame avonturen. Kijkt u naar de voorganger van die vrouwelijke kandidaat van nu.
I'm going to fight until every little girl in America knows she can grow up to be anything she wants, even President of the United States.
Een meisjesdroom die dit jaar waar zou kunnen worden voor Hillary Clinton zelf. Bekend geworden als vrouw van, First Lady, maar nu zelf gedoodverfd kandidaat. Ready to serve. En zij zal goed gekeken hebben naar 1987. Ook toen waren de Verenigde Staten in de ban van verkiezingen. Na 8 jaar Reagan schoven de Republikeinen George Bush senior naar voren en de Democraten, de partij van Hillary, 7 andere mannen. Plus, op het laatst, 1 vrouw, Pat Schroeder. Niet de eerste vrouwelijke kandidaat in de geschiedenis. Er waren er een paar geweest als niche-kandidaat voor vrouwenvragen. Wel de eerste die de hoop had dat ze echt kon winnen. Ze was een topjuriste, rap van de tongriem, gepokt en gemazeld in de politiek. En ze was moeder. Ze was kortom helemaal wat Hillary nu is. De vrouw van toen en die van nu gaat u mee op pad met Pat.
We are heading for Tampa for the Hillary rally, right? It's about an hour from here. Hopefully we get in. As I watch her campaign, a lot of this comes back and I realize what she's going through. I don't think anybody has been under as intense a scrutiny as she has. They never leave her alone. And yet she continues on with dignity and grace.
I'm happy that this is
We can't even get media in, right?
I agree.
Well, and I'm a former member of Congress, a good friend of hers.
Right,
So
so you're like,
can't get in
they're
either.
still sending
Nobody
people
can get in, right?
We have a U.S. I mean, we have a pass, and they still
Oh,
We have a
wow.
pass and everything. And you're from Guam?
Bahamas.
Bahamas.
We flew all these hours just to
no.
get it.
All right. We have to go to the press entrance down around the corner. Okay. Thank you.
1 second. Sure.
Oh, you're good to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold up, gentlemen.
Your mayor, Bob Buckhorn, and Hillary Clinton.
Do you recognize something from your time?
All the chaos, right? It's really wonderful. Yes, buttons, buttons, and more buttons. You know, every state did something a little different. That was the biggest, right? There we go. My father owned a private airport in Portland, Oregon, and that's where I was born in 1940. We were in a family that flew. I was either 15 or 16 when I got my pilot's license because my father felt that everybody in the airplane should know how to fly, which is probably a very good idea.
Born Portland, Oregon, 46 years of age, husband James, 24 years, 2 children. University of Minnesota, B.A., magna cum laude, Harvard University, Doctor of Laws, National Labor Relations Board, Denver, field attorney, 2 years. Private law practice, Denver, 6 years.
She had a very interesting upbringing. Her parents raised her to be very independent. Didn't raise her with the notion that she had to necessarily, get married and settle down and not have a career. And that was very different for most young women being raised in the 1950s even those that went to college like Schroeder, who was a brilliant student.
My husband was on that committee of young Democrats, and they were looking for a candidate to run for Congress.
Well, I thought it was a marvelous opportunity, and she had a lot of credentials.
And one night I had put and our 2-year-old to bed. He came home from the meeting and said, well, guess whose name came up? And I said, I don't know, whose? He said, yours. I'm like, what did you say? And the rest is history.
There were some people who just thought it was the most outrageous, awful thing. And she had people who would call up her campaign when she was running for Congress and, you know, yell at her and tell her she was a terrible mother and a horrible human being because she should be at home with those young children.
And people were like, what are you doing? You know, are you insane? Go run for school board or go run for city council or work your way up or do something else, but not this. So yes, there was an awful lot of pushback. Everybody kept asking me, how could I be a congresswoman and a mother? And no one ever says, how can you be a congressman and a father? I said, look, it's this. I have a brain, I have a uterus, they both work.
There were very few women in Congress. Out of 535 members of Congress, when the class that she was elected in, the year she was elected, she was one of only 14 women in the entire Congress.
I think there were 11 that came in that year, or it brought it to 11. Right after I first got there, I was waiting for the elevator with a member was there going on, and he asked me whose staff I was on, and you know, stuff like that constantly. We were not treated as members, we were treated as aides or assistants.
I remember one gentleman from Texas saying, honey, I don't know why you're here. He said, politics is about $1,000 bills, beautiful women, Lear jets, and Chivas Regal, and you don't like any of that. So it was an interesting time.
Women were not players in Congress. Women were not on the inside. They were not part of the decision making. They were more tolerated than worked with.
Pat, yeah, she's a pretty lady. We never agreed on anything.
Really?
Yeah, she was very, very liberal. And,
She got a lot of media attention right from the moment she entered Congress because she was so unusual. Not only was she a woman, one of only 14 women, but she was this young, very attractive mother with these 2 little children, and she had a way of speaking and relating to the media that made her a very good interview. And so all of a sudden there were interviews with Pat Schroeder everywhere, and she became a media sensation.
You know, men run and no one questions what they want. Women run and they say, what do they want? Yeah. And you say, human priorities. You know, that's all I want.
I was working on the editorial page staff of the Washington Post. So I was writing editorials and columns. I was kind of perplexed by her. I was surprised. She was an impressive figure. I'd followed her, you know, in the press. But up close, she was very kind of, she was very giggly and funny and sort of girly, and I wasn't expecting that. As a young woman, I expected her to be very serious, and I was kind of taken aback. The giggle, the smiley face, and the P of her signature. It seemed crazy, reckless, for one of Congress's few women to come across as less than dignified, to give ammunition to those who saw women as sugary little girls, rather than serious people to be taken seriously. And her signature, you know, she had the P in her signature, and then inside the P there was a smiley face. And for some reason, that just drove me nuts. I myself, I was always trying to be so professional, and I thought women had to do that. They had to overcompensate and be more professional and more serious and never be cutesy.
Well, I knew Pat almost from when she was first elected to Congress. Of all the women in Congress, she was the most welcoming for those of us who were on the front lines of the women's movement in the United States. She fought to get on the Armed Services Committee when she was first elected, because that's really where a lot of the decisions were being made.
And so she thought that if she could get a seat on the committee that was, you know, divvying up the defense money, she could try and redirect some of that money from the inside to the causes she cared for.
Mr. Andere, I loved him. We were good buddies, and he was so good to me. He'd always give me the best spot or the front position or anything I wanted, he would give me. He was great.
I had a very tough time because the chairman of the Armed Services Committee was what we Democrats called a boll weevil. He was from the South. He supported the Republican Party, basically. He was Democrat in name only. And he did not want a girl on his committee. And he didn't want an African American. But he said, I control one thing. I control how many chairs are at the dais. And these two people are only worth half of the rest of you, so they get one chair. So Ron and I looked at each other and it was like, oh my. This was my seatmate, Ron Dellums, and we shared a chair. To make a long story short, though, we did something that you weren't supposed to do as freshmen. We went out and made a lot of noise about it.
It's one of the cardinal rules of Congress that you don't humiliate your chairman in public if you want to get something done. So it kind of, from the beginning, set her on a path to being an outsider. She was more of a maverick role than somebody who was on the inside making the political decisions.
I've been in Armed Services Committee for 15 years. I'm the senior woman in the House. I've been the Arms Control Whip for the Democrats.
Pat Schroeder established herself as a sharp critic of Pentagon waste, a strong promoter of arms control, and a leading advocate of women's and family issues. Yet until May of this year, her only involvement in the 1988 presidential race was as the co-chair of Gary Hart's campaign.
Gary was a good friend from Colorado, and he had asked me to be the co-chair of his campaign, and I was honored to do it. And so I was taking all sorts of different speaking engagements or appearing in debates, or I was being like a surrogate for him when he couldn't come.
25 dagen geleden kondigde Gary Hart aan kandidaat te zijn voor het presidentschap. En tot het afgelopen weekende was hij ook verreweg de populairste kandidaat. En nu, minder dan een week later, heeft de ramp voor Gary Hart zich voltrokken. De droom is voorbij.
I got to my hotel room and there was a phone call from my husband who said, has anybody called you yet? I said, no. He said, turn on TV and don't answer the phone. And there it was. Gary had spent the weekend out on this monkey business boat with this young woman, and everything was breaking loose.
I think she got serious about it when, in the days following Hart's withdrawal from the campaign. You know, he withdrew in a sex scandal. And so Schroeder apparently just started thinking, you know, I could do this.
We had 7 men running and no women. So I thought, well, okay, I'll get out there.
We used to joke, it was sort of, Pat Schroeder was Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, because there were 7 men running and Pat.
That time in '87, Schroeder was a media sensation because she was a woman running for president, a first serious bid by or first woman seriously looking at running. A story immediately moved on the wire and went to all these newspapers and television stations, and there was a big congressional hearing going on, and they scrawled across the bottom of the TV screen, you know, Schroeder thinking about running, first woman running for president.
This we used in many, many campaigns. We just changed the message on the back for the campaign. But they were great. Got you through the summer months.
That summer, a group of us came together and said, we'll help you. And a few of us will take time off work, we'll travel with you, we'll help raise money, we'll do what we can.
Pat Schroeder for president, heaven forbid. She was pretty. That's about all I can say for her.
Well, we tried very hard every day to do as many different things as possible, to talk to blue-collar workers, to talk to women, to talk to minority groups, to just go out on the street and walk around and talk to just people, grocery stores, daycare centers, all sorts of different places we went. So we really went from morning to night. We never stopped.
The thing everyone wrote, and it's amazing to think of now that people would write this way. They said, but is she going to run as a woman? Will she run as a politician and an issues person? Or will she run as a woman?
The issue is America ready to accept me as a qualified presidential candidate who is a woman? That's got to be the way it is. I think if my name were Patrick and you looked at the qualifications, they're certainly equal or better.
You would give a speech on nuclear power or unions or whatever it was, and they would write about, why is she wearing green? You know, green just isn't a power color. And I think, really, is this about style or is this about... The guys never had to do that. I mean, we knew exactly what they wore. They wore a blue suit, a white shirt, a red tie. They wanted to look like they were busy to loosen the tie, you know, loosen the collar, throw the coat over the shoulders. What do women... We either look like an unmade bed or we look like a Vogue model.
You are in for a real treat. I can't carry a tune in a bucket. Judy, if you would come sing it, I would be honored. Last night I had a dream. I dreamed 1,000 times before. I saw a woman president walk through the White House door. It did not seem unusual to see her standing there. Her record on the issues always fine and always fair.
Wherever she's appeared, crowds have gathered, and people were indeed chanting, "Run, Pat, run." Letters began to pour in offering support and money, all with little organization, all with little expenditure of funds.
We were pleasantly surprised with the reaction we were getting. And I was on a trip with her to Minnesota, for example, and I'll never forget, we're driving in from the airport and we see these long lines, like very long lines. We think, oh, there must be a play or a concert or something. And as we get closer in, we realize those lines were there to see Pat.
And I stand here now 75,000 miles later, 50 cities later, 28 states later, and having lived a summer that was like a collage of boarding passes, having thrived on airline food, I finally got to the point where I'd take half of it home every night and see if the dog would eat it. He didn't eat much of it, so it worries me a lot, what I've done to my body in this period.
And then the astounding news. Time magazine reported she was third. She was ahead of people who'd been in the race for 2 years and raised millions of dollars. Most important, of all the candidates, she was the one whom people trusted the most.
I can't remember if it was Time or somebody ran a bunch of polls, and I kept coming out third. And that was about where I figured I was going to be forever, was third. I was never going to be first. But still, 3rd out of 8 wasn't bad for getting a late start. But here was the problem. When you polled people, there was a very significant number of people still who you would ask them, would you vote for a woman? And there would be, you know, a chunk that would say no. But then you also ask people, do you have friends who wouldn't vote for a woman? And then it goes up much higher. And I tended to believe that second one was more reflective than the first one of what we were working with at that time. If I had sat down and really analyzed it, these 7 guys have been out there for months. There's no way you're going to catch up that late, which I finally came to my senses and realized.
It was a beautiful day. It was all of her constituents in Denver. There was this wonderful balloon arch in her colors. There were people, you know, Run, Pat, Run was her theme.
Good morning, Denver.
I was, first of all, shocked at how many people were there. Because it was the middle of the afternoon on a weekday, you know.
Hey, thank you all for being here. You are so wonderful to join us in Denver, which is home, with my wonderful family.
And there she was with her husband, you know, standing next to her and making a statement, and nobody knew which way it was going to go.
I want to thank the police force. We really wanted to ride in on their horse, but they thought that might be tacky, but they couldn't have been nicer. What a great Denver day. Couldn't have a nicer one.
So there was a lot of suspense, and she didn't give a clue right away. She talked about her feelings about the race and what she was up against and what she wanted to do.
Taking our Denver Forum of Open Politics on the road this summer, I learned a lot about America, and I learned a lot about Pat Schroeder. That's why I will not be a candidate for president.
When people finally realized she wasn't going to run, there was this big groan.
That went out. And that really did it. So I shed a few tears, and oh my goodness, you would have thought I'd had a total nervous breakdown.
There must be a way, but I haven't figured it out yet.
There was a tremendous reaction to that, a tremendous negative reaction all over the country. Mostly, I mean, the loudest were conservatives who hated her anyway.
Summer's contacts were warm and wonderful. The spontaneity was terrific. And I could not bear to turn every human contact into a photo opportunity, nor could I bear to be separated by people who were well-meaning, but trying to protect me. I would shrivel.
It became a game. Who can write the most outraged editorial about this crazy woman who shed 2 tears?
With all these strong reasons to run, Schroeder went with the reasons not to. They were reasons that carried those same unmistakable associations of gender. She said in her statement that the highest level of political campaigning wasn't personal enough. Quote, "I could not bear to turn every human contact into a photo opportunity," unquote. She hated having to be in a public role every second, something every politician above a certain level has to accept without undue grumbling. Instead of accepting it herself, Schroeder decided not to play. She even wept. I was young and I took it all very personally. I think women that age do, you know, you're looking for examples everywhere and there are so few. And when she got to the end of this, she wept. I don't know if she actually broke down sobbing, but it was not subtle, it was very visible. She cried. And a lot of people noticed she cried. And This made me really mad.
See, I set the movement back. Oh my gosh, it was awful. I kept saying maybe I could get Kleenex as a sponsor. You know, who knows? But no, she just, I understand that. And there were many others that wrote the same thing in different papers around the country.
They portrayed her as weak, you know, unfit, because she couldn't handle her emotions at this important moment in her life.
No commander-in-chief.
No commander-in-chief, yes. Yeah, who we can't have a president that cries.
We're going to go on to help this great city, this great state, and this great country. The House of Representatives is the people's body.
Just take it like that. We're doing fine.
I started a crying file then of all the men who shed tears. And nobody ever seemed to, that was wonderful because they showed that they were compassionate. And that's when you begin to realize there's this whole different thing for women.
Schroeder also had trouble raising money and recruiting experienced staff. And she had said all along that she wasn't interested in a symbolic campaign. She would run only if she could win.
I wanted America to see me as a candidate for president who was a woman, rather than a woman's candidate.
She found that too much of America wasn't ready to do that.
It's just not the time yet. People aren't ready to vote for a woman, or enough people weren't ready. So I'm out. And I think people were really surprised by that.
And was it because you are a woman, or was it because of your ideas?
I think it was mainly being a woman, starting late, having trouble raising money.
She didn't have the kind of professional staff around her and the number of people and dollars that it takes to mount a presidential campaign. So first and foremost, she didn't have the apparatus. It was also a great hurdle to just simply be a woman.
Definitely, in our country, we call it a glass ceiling. You know, how do you break the glass ceiling? And Pat put a dent in that glass ceiling, but she wasn't able to break it.
We just hadn't brought forth the right one. Maybe, you know, it was more the candidate than it was the voters, the country, that we hadn't put up the correct one. Now, if I had run...
And so I ask you, dream with me and make our dreams come true. Pat Schroeder for our president, the best for me and you.
Een Amerikaanse droom die nou eens niet uitkwam. Te laat begonnen, te weinig geld en steun geworven. En wie weet toch te veel vrouw geweest met al die tranen. Wie zal het zeggen? Zeker is wel dat Hillary Clinton nu haar lesje heeft geleerd. Die is heel vroeg aan de campagne begonnen. Werkt er al een half leven naartoe. En die heeft waanzinnig veel geld en steun geworven. Laat niets aan het toeval over, laat geen traan. Maar krijgt nu het verwijt dat ze gesloten is. Ze laat zich maar niet zien, ze is geen mens. Een beetje weinig vrouw. Dus ga er maar aan staan. Een vrouw als president klinkt veel aannemelijker dan in de jaren 80... maar vanzelfsprekend is toch anders. Dit was Andere Tijden, terug naar de onze. Dan zien we u komende zaterdag graag weer terug... met een polder die rond 1960 op de schop ging... en een toonbeeld werd van een modern boerenleven.
Nou, is de hele ochtend gewerkt aan het verplaatsen van de koeien. Als je dat zo ziet, dat kan eigenlijk niet meer.
En toen kwam in 1954 de streekverbetering, ruilverkaveling.
Verbetering van hun eigen leven, verbetering van het wonen, verbetering van het werk en ook van de landbouw.